Good morning, guys. Thanks for having me. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. All right, so the news pops, which everybody anticipated over the weekend. Everybody was talking about Bryce Underwood trending towards LSU. He makes it official, Sam, and now bumps LSU up to this number one class. What did you make of the news of Underwood choosing the Tigers?
Well, like you said, it was kind of expected. Joe Sloan has done a fantastic job leading this recruitment for several months, and right now LSU looks to be a fantastic spot for Bryce Underwood. They just promoted the quarterbacks coach, Joe Sloan, to be the OC with Coach Hankton. Right now you have two of the highest acclaimed young assistant coaches in the game, two of the best recruiting coaches in the game, now co-calling plays in Baton Rouge. Meanwhile, while Michigan is playing for a national championship, the biggest story coming out of Houston going into the game is whether Jim Harbaugh will coach the Raiders or the Chargers in the next week. So I think if you're Bryce Underwood, and you're LSU, it's a massive spot for their recruitment right now. First of all, they've landed three of these triplets: Harlem, Berry, DeCorian Moore, and Bryce Underwood. It's going to be a battle to hold on to DeCorian Moore with schools like Oregon and Texas continuing to chip away, and with Bryce Underwood. I hate to break it to the LSU fans, but there's going to be a whole season and a whole new slew of contenders that try to chip away. But it's always easier to play from ahead. I think, for LSU's purposes, getting the in-state commitment from five-star running back Harlem Berry is truly the highlight of the weekend. That's not to take away from DeCorian Moore. It's not to take away from Bryce Underwood. Those are straight-up dudes. Harlem Berry is the number one player in the state. Having him committed ahead of his senior season is a great spot to be in, especially when there's still several other big notable targets in the state of Louisiana and nationally to go after.
Let's talk a little bit about Berry. Berry, of course, is a guy that he may not play against the top line competition, but he's also a guy who has done these national camps and has really succeeded on those circuits. I compared him to Stingley a couple of sessions ago, just because of very similar in classification of their high school, but then you put them on the national scene and they dominate there as well. What do you make of Berry's game and what LSU gets in that running back?
Well, you're exactly right. The comparison to Derek Stingley, to Devontae Smith, to all of these ballers that have come from our state that have, maybe played in 1A or 2A or 3A football, but have gone on to thrive not only in the college level, but in the NFL as first-round picks. I don't care what the competition is. If you dominate your level of competition, then it's going to translate to the next level. We're going to see it from Arch coming up soon, and Arch played against Harlem every year in a jamboree. So that's an FYI for context. Harlem Berry also, again, at a national level, goes to these competitions. He ran a 4.37 at the what is it called? The Future 50 in July. He's absolutely phenomenal. He reminds me of Joe McKnight coming out of Curtis, the way he is able to create on his own. He can make you miss in a vacuum. He's as good as a receiver as he is as a runner, which is extremely rare to say about running backs today. I think the biggest knock on Harlem is that he's 5'11" and 180 pounds. He's a slighter running back. That's why LSU is going to probably bring in at least two running backs in that 2025 cycle and come up with a more untraditional role. I mean, maybe 10 years ago we're talking about Cam Cameron and then Matt Canada coming in to be your offensive coordinators, but now with Joe Sloan and Cortez Hankton coming off the Mike Denbrock era MBR, you have a lot more confidence as someone with Harlem Berry's skill set that can be used at 2 or 3 or 4 different positions in the return game is going to have be around the right set of pieces and the right quarterback play to really have a lot of success in this offense. I think it's a monster get to kick off this cycle. Frank Wilson is on a tear beginning on New Year's Eve, flipping Dominic McKinley, and I don't think LSU has stopped ever since, and it's the middle of January now.
A little bit about Moore, DeCorian Moore. Heard comparisons to kind of Odell in the way that he moves. When you see his game, who does he remind you of?
Yeah, Odell has been the early comparison amongst me and Cody Blair, who is obviously a former LSU scout and now does it at On3. He reminds you so much of Odell with his body control, his hands. He can jump out the gym. His athleticism is rare. And then watching Duncanville in the playoffs, I always say Odell was so different because not only was he elite, first of all, as a soccer player and then as a football player, but he was also elite playing cornerback at Newman. Coach Stu will tell you the same thing if you go uptown and ask him about Odell. Doran Moore played cornerback all throughout the high school football playoffs in Texas, including in the state championship. He went against other 3 and 4 and highly rated Power 5 wide receivers. I saw him with a pass breakup. I saw him with another one in the state championship. He is out of this world athletic. I think he could play any position at the next level, but he is a phenomenal receiver. He's the number 1 wide receiver in the country already for a reason. Not only is he productive on the field on Friday nights, but we talked about these camp settings. He blows them up week to week, Jordy. I have a feeling we're going to talk 3 or 4 more times throughout the offseason about something that Doran Moore did that went viral or took everyone by storm. He is that level dude. He is a top 5 player in the country. We're talking about a difference-making wide receiver like in the 2024 class with guys like Jeremiah Smith and Cam Coleman.
When you watch Underwood play, he makes the game look very easy. He flicks his wrist, the ball jumps 50 yards out of his hand. He decides to take off. He just runs away from everybody. What is his game when you break him down? How special of a prospect is Bryce Underwood, who the Tigers picked up over the weekend?
Yeah, for context, I think it's always easy to point to a kid who's ranked number 1 as an underclassman when they're a quarterback. But, I think Bryce Underwood is that number 1 player in the country level good kind of prospect. I don't think that on 3, accidentally puts people number 1 if they're not ready. Bryce Underwood has a decorated body of work. When you're talking about quarterback check marks, he really does check all of the boxes with his state championship pedigree. I try to tell dads and coaches do not dwell on the stats because stats can be misleading. But in terms of areas of importance, touchdown to interception ratio and completion percentage, and then you look at the mechanics and the throwing motion, the ability to deliver on the run, and I mean, Jordy, you kind of hinted at it. There's a smoothness to his game. It looks like he is in control, and at this position, when you analyze guys and you watch them go through camp and you watch them get plays from their coaches and then you watch them execute in big moments, the biggest thing, besides all the physical gifts, which only 1 or 2% of the population has, it's the mental capacity and the way that Bryce Underwood handles everything on the field, off the field. I don't think that you can teach that. I don't think that you can learn that over time. I think it's innate to Bryce Underwood. He's obviously connected excellently with Joe Sloan over the last couple of months. I think Joe and Coach Hankton and BK are just drooling about the future of the quarterback position after what they saw with Nussmeier in the bowl game. The depth behind them are Ricky Collins and Colin Hurley behind him, and then a true superstar in the making waiting at the end of this line coming in about 2 years.
Sam, you've mentioned the elevation of Joe Sloan to co-offensive coordinator with Hankton for the bowl game in that experiment. Do you expect that to be the resolution here for Kelly?
Yeah, I do. Yeah, I don't think that they're going to let Joe Sloan or Cortez Hankton walk out the door. Cortez Hankton and Joe Sloan are both head coaching candidates around the country for various jobs. I think that if LSU didn't promote one or both of them to the offensive coordinator position, somebody else would be willing to right away. I think personally they've been grooming Sloan to be the offensive coordinator for several years at this point. He's been the quarterback's coach. He's the life and face of this coaching staff, the way he's been recruiting and representing himself. And the same with Cortez Hankton. Nobody has a stronger body of work at their position developing players besides the guy who just groomed Malik Neighbors, who should have been the Biletnikoff winner. BT is in the mix to be a first-round pick. I just think that Cortez Hankton was in the mix for the Tulane job. You know that other schools around the country are going to come calling eventually to hire him as a head coach. I think this is a great opportunity. He already has such a strong resume. Between Joe Sloan and Cortez Hankton, I think LSU's in a great spot. I do expect them to make this move in the end. And all of a sudden, this LSU coaching staff has a lot of familiar faces, and it's very Louisiana strong.
That's right.
You don't blink twice, guys, because they are as full strength as they have ever been in the past 10 years.
Yeah, I was kind of drives me right to my next question. Frank Wilson, what he's doing here in what year feels like year 25 of doing this might be his best body of work. I want to get to that, but we saw Don McKinley pledge last week, and then we saw the entire defensive staff fired at the end of the week, and nobody is decommitted. nobody has really moved on that. Can you talk about the role that Wilson has picked up here on the recruiting trail the last couple of weeks and months for LSU and what it has meant of closing on this class for LSU?
For sure. First of all, when there was a little bit of a stake in the grass with Elijah Robinson going to Syracuse, accepting that defensive coordinator position job, when there was a little bit of smoke, Frank and LSU jumped on that immediately. They started with Gabe Relaford. As soon as it was official that Eli was not going to stay in College Station, Gabe already knew where he was going to go. He wasn't going to go all the way to upstate New York. Trust me, I'm from New York. No one wants to go to school upstate New York and deal with that snow. He had visited LSU several times. Frank Wilson started to push over the summer. He realized that he was late on not only Relaford but also McKinley. Frank is from this state. He knows how to deal with these coaches. He knows how to deal with the parents. They obviously got Relaford on campus several times leading into that flip. With Don McKinley, it was a little bit more interesting. Dom visited Baton Rouge in July, but never returned. He visited College Station twice before ultimately flipping to LSU. The biggest difference there, Frank and BK went in home with the McKinleys, as our friend Shay Dixon pointed out. They didn't even know that Frank was at the door, so they opened it up and they spent the night, talking to Mrs. McKinley. They raved about the presence that Frank and BK had in their house, the impact that they had just speaking to both Dom and his little brother Darius, who's going to be a top 2026 recruit at Acadiana. And in the end, when there's a little bit of uncertainty around the state, if you're going to go out of state, you have to be sure of it. With the uncertainty about the defensive line and College Station, the opportunities to stay home and play for the Tigers ultimately won out. He didn't even have to make his official visit, which he will later this month. I don't expect him to take his OB to Tennessee. It's a true testament to Frank Wilson, who spent time with the McKinleys during Acadiana State Championship run and the days leading up to it. Frank Wilson, he gets knocked a lot for recruiting out of state, and he did that very well this year, going out of state to Texas, to Duncanville, to get Caden Durham. But as far as what most LSU fans care about locking down the state, I think we might have talked about this in September. They kept a good chunk, if not most, of the kids that they wanted in the state of Louisiana, with the exception of Wardell Mack, who flipped to Texas. Yeah. And I think if Wardell Mack, if you gave it more time, I think that some of the hires that LSU would make would have him thinking twice. That being said, you have to credit Frank Wilson. He stepped up in such a big way with all of the changing on the LSU coaching staff. He did a phenomenal job of locking down Louisiana, and often, and I say this all the time, when you lock down Louisiana, it often yields a championship in the next 3 or 4 years.
Do they have a chance, or what are the chances they have in closing here on Terry Bussey?
I think it'll be interesting to see. I know that this A&M staff has really dialed up the pressure on Terry Bussey. Both Kerry Cooks and Ishmael Artside, the new A&M DB coach, were in Jerry's world for his state championship. We know that Kerry Cooks is obviously not a part of this LSU staff anymore, which I think hurts LSU's chances in the long run. There's a lot of familiarity still on this staff. I think some of the people that LSU is going to hire is going to have Terry thinking. I know that Georgia is very much in the mix. Dante Williams was pushing hard when he was at USC. His first call when he got to Athens was to Terry Bussey. Like LSU, Alabama is still sniffing around, but the sense that I got going into January was it's going to be very hard for A&M to lose Terry Bussey, and they're doing everything they can not to.
Sammy, a few more, I'll get you out of here. The Under Armour, the All-American games were last week, and it seemed like LSU had a very good presence there, and Don McKinley was one of the standouts. Any other takeaways from the All-American games from your point of view, whether it was LSU or just anywhere from some of the stories that you saw?
Sure. Off the top of my head, along with Don McKinley, the other LSU commit LSU signee rather, Kylan Billiot, he was someone who impressed us all in the camp setting last summer, this summer. He had a good, not great senior season at Terrebonne. That's not his fault. Obviously, they're working without a traditional quarterback over there, but seeing him in this All-American game setting, Kylan Billiot showed a fantastic catch rate. He has incredible hands. He was beating, future SEC and Big Ten defensive backs. Kylan Billiot looked polished. He was able to separate. In my opinion, he was a major stock-up candidate. And the same for Don McKinley. His stock was already through the roof. Everyone knows what I think of Don McKinley as a prospect. But, we've seen him at Acadiana, and he plays largely on the interior defensive line, and it's not the most sexy position. I don't need to tell you guys that. But seeing him go against one-on-ones for the first time in his life, putting dudes on the ground, showing that innate get-off, that explosiveness, you love this to see what Don McKinley is going to look like in 2 years after being in that LSU weight program and having a defensive line coach him up. The last takeaway, and I'm stealing this a little bit from my colleague Charles Powers, but Cam Coleman and Jeremiah Smith, the two top receivers in the country, and then TJ Moore from Clemson, for that matter. Those three receivers are a class above everyone else in the country for this year. They absolutely dominated. I think Cam Coleman and Jeremiah Smith have an AJ Green, Julio Jones sort of feel going into this recruiting cycle. Like I said, some years there's good quarterbacks and there's great quarterbacks like Bryce Underwood. This year, it's the year of the receiver, and Jeremiah Smith and Cam Coleman are a cut above everyone else, and it's been fun to watch the past 2 weeks.
Last one, Sammy. National recruiting analyst over at On3, Sam Spiegelman, does great work. Read his work at Sam Spiegs on social media or hit him at On3. Blake Baker was just hired as a defensive coordinator for LSU from Missouri. Talk about his recruiting prowess. From all accounts, it seems like he loves that part of the game. How good is he on the trail?
Well, it's easy to recruit when you're recruiting your home state, and Blake Baker is a New Orleans guy. His wife is a New Orleans lady. They're back home. I don't think they ever wanted to leave BR, and for a lot of his career when he was at La Tech and elsewhere, he was trying to get back here. Look at someone like Brad Davis or someone in the past like Corey Raymond. It's a lot easier to recruit to someplace you know and someplace you love and someplace that's home. Personally, Blake Baker was the guy who was the first to offer someone like Xavier Atkins out there in Jonesboro Hodge. He's got an incredible eye for talent. He's done that at every stop he's had, from the time he was at La Tech with Amik Robertson to LSU when he was coaching Damone Clark and those guys, to the time that he got to Missouri. It's nothing new to Blake Baker. I thought he got the raw end when he left LSU the first time. I'm truly happy for him that he's back. I think that it's incredible to see the personalities that are on this staff. Like I mentioned earlier, this is a Louisiana heavy staff, and someone like Blake Baker fits in so seamlessly. I think it's going to be like playing with matches for him recruiting Louisiana. I got a feeling that the defenders in this state are all going to have a great time getting to spend some time with Blake Baker and see how creative and aggressive he is on the defensive side of the ball. I think that fits the LSU defense that fans are more accustomed to.
Could he flip Wardell Mack? Is it possible? Could he get in on him?
No, Wardell already signed, but Wardell, Terry Joseph, another New Orleans guy, came in hot after Wardell, and that's what happens when you have a school like Texas that hires a Louisiana guy to recruit the West Bank of New Orleans, and Terry just does a fantastic job. He did it with Derek Williams 2 years ago, who's going to be an all-conference safety that LSU is going to have to wear about. Louisiana guys just recruit different, Jordy. I don't know how to explain it.
Yeah. Sammy, great work. Thanks for talking to us this morning, man. We'll talk again soon.
Yep, have a good one, guys.
There he is.